All right, it's 8 o'clock. Call this meeting to order. Board Secretary statement.
Thank you. Good morning, board, staff, and members of the public. After my statement, the chairman will open this meeting and explain the rules for this electronic meeting. Please keep your microphone on mute while you are not speaking. The technical support team may proactively mute participants if the microphone is picking up background noise. Board members should check to make sure the microphone is not muted before speaking. You may text me at 540-336-3948 at any time during the meeting if you need technical support, and an IT tech will call your cell to assist. I now turn the meeting over to Chairman Sultan.
Loudon Water Board is meeting today by electronic means pursuant to Virginia Code 2.2-3708.2A3. Public notice and meeting access information was provided on the Loudon Water website. A recording of the meeting will be available at this link, www.loudonwater.org/virtual-meeting-recordings. Future meetings will be in person unless indicated otherwise in the public notice. Board members wishing to speak are reminded to press unmute and identify themselves by name so that staff can accurately capture comments. All approved items will be recommended to the November 10th, 2022 board meeting. The board secretary will now take a roll call of the committee members.
Thank you. Mr. Sultan?
Here.
Mr. Bonfils? Mr. Bonfils was having some issues logging in. IT will be calling him to see if he needs support. Mr. Moody?
Here.
Ms. Sursakar?
Here.
And I'd like to also acknowledge that Chairman Koblis is on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Can I have a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
Yeah, this is Keith. I'll make a motion to approve.
And I'll second the motion. Can we get a roll call?
Yes, Mr. Sultan?
Yes.
Mr. Bonfils? Mr. Moody?
Yes.
Ms. Sursakar?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one action item. That's approval of professional services contract amendment, Broad Run wastewater treatment plant phase 3. This is design task 1.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just requesting control here of the presentation.
Okay.
All right, clicked one too far. So good morning, everyone. As I mentioned in the last meeting presentation at the full board meeting, that we would be here today to talk about approval of our first design task under the overall phase 3 program. As part of this, we wanted to start walking through our overall phasing for this large expansion of the plant. So we'll walk through that first. So what you see is the plant layout that we showed you last time with all the new facilities for phase 3 shown in color, but we're starting to break out the construction phasing that we've laid out for this project. So the first phase will be, sorry, it's incredibly sensitive. An overall site preparation package, which is shown in the dotted line. This will go out early so that we can get excavation, stockpile removal, any rock removal that's required moving early. So when we're ready to move forward with the larger construction, it can proceed in a faster manner. The first construction package would then be what we're doing in the light blue color, and this is the expansion of our biological process, so our BRBs and our membranes, and the new solids treatment system that we've been talking about with the thermal drying of the biosolids. These are the most time-sensitive portions of the expansion. So phasing this separate from the rest of the construction allows it to move forward quickly and efficiently so that we can meet our current capacity projections. After that, we started looking at packages that made sense for construction. So the second package will be a little bit darker blue here and over in the existing facilities. So as a second package, this made a lot of sense for us so that you could have it moving independently from that first time critical construction. There's lots of flexibility here on combinations of contractor, one contractor. We liked the control it gave us on how the facility will be built. And then the very last package will come out and fully extend our biological process, get us more UV and carbon at the end, and be that final completion out to the 30 MGD. So phasing of this work also allows us the ability to control timing. So if the project needs to speed up or can slow down, the various points can be moved based on their criticality. We can also watch as conditions change, and if something works out with, DC water, we can have adjustments in that final package. So there's a lot of benefits that we see to this current phasing structure. But again, this is a 15-year program. So in the next couple of years, we're really going to be focusing on those first two phases. And so this is what that first site preparation package really looks like by itself. And we're giving our anticipated timing of completing that. So it's a very large area that we're talking about working in on the site prep. We do have a large stockpile that has existed from the very beginning of Broad Run that will need, some relocation, and we're on really high bedrock. So there will be some rock removal required in this. And then the second package that we'll be working on is this more time critical solid system expansion. So it's really involving, the more biological side of the process. These systems need expanding early because, as we've mentioned, we're having more concentrated wastewater. So that's creating a larger load specifically on these two treatment trains. So this expansion allows us to really take a good leap, get ahead. But what's important to know is on this solids facility, we're taking that all the way to 30. So when we finish that expansion, the new dryer facility will be completely out. This is a much bigger package, and so you'll see the longer time period reflected here. And this schedule is really laid out based on, at this point, as soon as we think we can get there. And as soon as we're ready, we want to proceed with these. So I want to show now what the overall program schedule looks like. And so, the first two design contracts that we talked about are spread out, really through the end of 2029, and we're starting to indicate how their construction costs break out. So in the last presentation, we mentioned, a whole overall project cost of $650 million. Well, 550 of that was in construction. The remaining was the design and engineering services. So we've got some package costs broken out here to talk about today and talk about timing. When we look at these, though, every time we come back, we'll be able to give you additional updates on this overall schedule because, again, the phasing gives us some flexibility. If market conditions look good, we can take package 3 and move it up. If we're not seeing increases, we can move package 3 or package 4 out. We're really liking the amount of flexibility we're getting. So first step here today, though, is to get the design services started on this. So the previous contract that was awarded was for, planning of this. So this will be the first really step at design. And I did want to just reiterate, so when we brought forward initially the selection of Hazen and Sawyer, that was a qualification-based selection of their services for the overall phase 3 expansion. So each of these design tasks and construction services tasks will all be amended onto that main contract that they were awarded. So design task 1, I'm so sorry. Design task 1, we started looking at, this is a really long time period for design, right? So giving one big design task that covers almost 10 years, it's really hard to control scope and budget and to know all the items that might be included. So what we really started looking at is we need to break this into smaller tasks so that we can get firm scopes and make sure that we're being able to capture changes in the program as we move along. So what we want to talk about today is the approach for those first two construction packages and how we've laid out these design tasks. And so design task 1 is lining up with, really starting our first site preparation contract, and design task 2 is lining up with the larger construction package. Now, traditionally, when you start looking at fees for design services, those are evaluated in many ways, right? You look at number of hours assigned to the work, you look at burn rates, but you also evaluate the size of that contract versus the construction cost. The budgeting metric that we threw out in the last presentation was 10%. You often look that design isn't greater than 10% of that construction cost. So when we look at these larger construction contracts, a 200 million construction, that would be a $20 million design contract. This is a very large contract for the organization, and it's covering a long period of time. It would need to start today and move almost 4 years into the future. So a large value, a large scope of time, but also we mentioned the construction cost numbers that we're using here. They're at a very conceptual level. We're using parametric costs at this point to get budgetary numbers. And by parametric cost, you look at the cost of a similar size facility and say, okay, we're building maybe 10 more MGD, so we're just scaling that cost up to get a budgetary number. So when we started looking at how are we going to justify and make sure that we're paying the right level for these services, we decided that we're not ready to move forward with as large of a contract as incorporating this design task 2 would have been. So we've developed a strategy with design task 1 that what we want to do with this task is we absolutely want to get ready for that site preparation because it's a large area and we know what it is. As part of that work, we want to move ahead with the basis of design report for all 4 of these packages. That design report will give us sizing of systems, actual building layouts and footprints, and allow a better cost estimate to be developed. And really, you need one step better in the estimating level than we are to have a better number to judge that design contract by. And based on the conversations that we've been having lately with the board, we felt this was also a great opportunity to bring in a third-party cost verification. So that way, the design engineer that is going to be receiving the award of the design contract doesn't have sole decision-making responsibility, right, on what the cost of this contract is and what the value of their design contract might be. We've been working with an independent engineering firm to have them come in at the end of the basis of design report and give us a second estimate. We feel that that's really going to bring a lot more confidence in the construction cost planning that we're moving forward with and making sure we have a sound number to weigh this large task order against when we're ready to bring that forward. So the discussion today is going to be more detail about design task 1 in specific, but we felt it was important to really review the overall approach to bringing forward the much larger design tasks in the future. And this task will be really critical in preparing us for those steps as we move forward. So looking at the detailed scope in this first design task, I've broken it out into the major items and we've got some schedules, but staff have been working on negotiating this design task. I think there might be a question. Should we stop and take that before I move
Yes,
further?
Mr. Moody has a question.
Yes, good morning, Kendra. Yeah, the question I have is, you had mentioned you're using parametric estimating. Have you used that before? Is this the first time we're using parametric estimating for your cost modeling?
So at this level of a project, it's actually very typical. And so when we started the current expansion of Broad Run, that was what we used for planning level of that expansion, was we did a parametric estimate based on the first cost of constructing Broad Run. So what we struggle with in a planning level estimate, because there is no building sizing yet, there are no quotes from vendors that you can pull together and do takeoffs, but Broad Run is a very unique facility. So there are not many cost numbers to compare out there on building a facility of our size into our effluent limits. So we've had a lot of success thus far with Broad Run in scaling from past construction. And then when we looked at those, we also moved them up to today's dollars. So it was a parametric based on cost to construct and the capacity we got, and then we moved it from $2008 to $2022.
What about
But
the underlying?
okay.
What about the underlying model that was used before? Is it the same, or is this a new model to support the parametric estimating?
Yeah, we do update it as we go along, is what I
Okay.
would call, because we're always feeding new information into it. So we don't start over from scratch because we like that past information, but we are bringing new items in. I would say one of the large focuses in this was we were able to add the actual bidding price we got from the phase 2 expansion, but also had to tackle the market conditions right now and the high level of escalation. And I would just like to say, we tried to balance both of those. We didn't want to say, because this is a 15-year contract, that we want to escalate all of these prices for the crazy market we're seeing now, right? We tried to temper that so that we got some better long-term projections. But each time we start another design task, we'll be able to get more accurate at those cost estimates as we move forward and bring in current market conditions and continue to update as we go along.
And you mentioned there was a third-party entity coming in to review. Are they coming in to look at the model or the input of the model, inputs into the model, or is it all the above? Just trying to understand that role.
Yeah, we're actually going to ask them to look at it separately. So we're going with a firm that has a cost estimating arm, right?
Okay.
And so we want them to look at it not as a parametric cost. This will be our first detailed level cost that comes after the basis of design report is produced. So they're going to look building by building and say, yes, we think that's a good cost for that building, or we think it might be off because of these items.
Okay. And one last question. You'd mentioned in a previous slide about expansion of the solid waste, I believe, treatment facility. You said 30. I'm assuming that's 30 MGD. What is it at now? I'm assuming that's when you said 30. What is it now?
Yes. So for our biosolids treatment, we're just using anaerobic digestion right now, and that is under the phase 2 expansion will be 16 MGD.
Okay.
And so we selected 30 as our target goal for the Broad Run expansion, is to get us to a total of 30. But the dryer facility is new. So you're basically constructing the whole dryer as a new 30 MGD capacity. It will utilize the existing anaerobic digestion system, but will cover the full expansion. We won't have to come back and expand that system more.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Kendra.
Mr. Sultan has a question.
Yeah, the project management task that you showed, is that just for design task 1?
Yes. So for project management, we are going to break that out per task so that we know the duration that the project management has to span. So I plan to go through that in detail as I do continue through the presentation. So is it okay if we come back and talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, that's fine. One other question. What for the design package, design task 1 for the excavation and that type of thing, what did you use as a cost estimate for that work?
Yep. So this individual task to prepare design package 1 was based on hours required to produce the documents. So since it is a civil-based project, it's much easier to estimate because we're talking about one discipline. We know the area that we're going to cover, but as part of the scope for this line item that we're talking about here, this also includes our survey and geotechnical work. We want to get that done early, and that will inform the construction documents produced here. But because we know general site conditions and the area that we're targeting, we've got a better idea of what the scope of that work is going to be.
I assume that you know rock conditions from the previous construction.
And that's what we've done this basic estimate on, but the geotechnical work included in here will confirm that prior to the preparation of the documents.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, so to take a step back and talk about the items in the design task. So project management is going to span a 2-year period associated with design task 1. This not only includes the management tasks of monitoring scope, budget, and schedule, but there's also key project meetings included in this task order. The design basis report is the one part of this design task 1 that uncovers the scope of the entire project. So it is prudent to go ahead and get the entire facility design. So that way, as we break out these individual contracts, we know they're all designed around the same basis. We need to get critical design decisions made first on how big we're going to size our BRBs or our granular activated carbon. So we're moving forward from a set point. The other key part about that design basis report is it allows us to get a better cost estimate. So once we've got actual building footprints and actual building layouts, it allows us to get our first detailed estimate and bring in that independent cost estimator. Right now, we don't have enough project description to have someone come in and really verify our budgetary costs. Mr. Kobelis?
Kobelis froze. One moment.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that basis of design report is for 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Correct.
Okay.
And the updated cost estimates that we get will be for all 4 of those packages as well.
And while I've interrupted, just real quick, design task number 2 is to finish the design of 2, 3, and 4.
So that one would be design task 2. Is just to do the design for our second phase of construction. So that would be just the BRBs and the solids. We would then move forward with individual design tasks for the following 2.
Thanks.
Okay, so the basis of design report, this task item, is a very substantial report. It's going to cover 14 different process areas and 8 different disciplines. So it is a large undertaking in and of itself, but is that critical starting point so that we know moving forward how the rest of the facilities will be constructed. So the design of construction package number 1 includes development of plans, specifications, and bid phase services for that site preparation work. We do want to get at that as soon as we can, so we will just wait until the design basis has confirmed our overall footprint and we've completed our survey and geotechnical and be able to prepare those documents and get started with that construction. The next task that we have included in this initial scope is some equipment pre-procurement. Now, this is going to be a similar approach to what we did on the phase 2 expansion, and that is where we have to go to the membrane manufacturer and pre-negotiate a price so that we can get shop drawings developed. So Some systems are so large and really custom designed for the site that we can't complete the design of the facilities without knowing the details of the system going in. This is usually only very large, very complex processes like membranes. And we will also need to do this for the thermal dryer on our biosolids. The approach has worked very well on the phase 2 expansion, so we plan to move forward in the same process. So we will have the pre-procurement documents. You really have to have specifications and drawings for them to know generally what they need to give you a price and shop drawings for. Loudon Water would then enter into an agreement with those manufacturers to say that we're going to purchase your equipment and we direct pay for the shop drawings. That contract is transferred to the construction contractor, and they then take ownership of the final purchase, delivery, and installation of the system. And like I said, that contract transfer process has worked well in the current expansion, and it really allowed us to get a good design in place. So we are planning to move forward with the same process. The award of those pre-procurement contracts does come back to the board for approval. So you will see us, late 2023 as we talk about finalizing that so that we have the documents ready for that construction package to design. Additional evaluations is a large pot here, and this is because with an upgrade of this size in a facility, there are many things that need to be evaluated other than just the technology we're putting in right now. So we wanted to go through the numerous studies that we're going to be including in the other evaluations that are critical for us to know what the overall facility expansion looks like. And so in this line item, we've got our feasibility study for future pyrolysis. So this is where we will get that footprint and cost and make sure we have reserved appropriate site space for if an advanced thermal process like gasification or pyrolysis is required at Broad Run for the PFAS removal of the biosolids. We're also going to do a biosolids market assessment because that thermal dryer moves us into a higher class of biosolids production. And so it's important for us to know what our new options are for the handling and final removal of those solids. Yes, I think there's another question.
I have a question. I think pre-procurement works very well, but I'm wondering in this market, should that be put off some to see if the prices go down at all?
So I would like to propose that that's something we wait and see when the prices come in, if that's a decision we should like to make. If we defer that pre-procurement, we will have to defer the design of the second construction package and may be in a position where we wouldn't have treatment capacity online.
Okay, thank you.
Also in our additional evaluations, because we are doubling the size of the Broad Run facility, we need to conduct a warehouse evaluation as well as a personnel space evaluation to make sure that we have the appropriate auxiliary facilities to support the larger amount of spare parts and workforce that will be required to support the bigger system. We also are looking at, if we're going to build a brand new portion of the plant, we want to make sure that we're utilizing the most advanced management strategies. So we're going to have guidance documents and templates developed for asset-enabled building information models so that we can break the cycle of being in a looking up a part number, going to look up the O&M, all separate from the 3D models that we already have of our facilities. It ties all the information on individual pieces of equipment together with the models so that it's easier to use, easier to access, and it'll be a large improvement in our overall asset management. And then we also have been talking previously in our planning studies about advanced operation tools that we're developing for Broad Run, incorporating artificial intelligence and machine learning, it's important for us to take a pause here and develop an overall digital strategy plan so that Loudon Water IT is able to develop the tools and support the advanced algorithms that we're having to be developed so that we can get them implemented over the next 15 years. With our current tasks that we have on machine learning, we've been working very closely with IT and really doing some progressive work and development. So that overall digital strategy is going to be critical so that we can move those systems forward together to be able to take advantage of the full power of these advanced operation tools. The very last line item is piloting, and this is where we have included 3 phases of optimization piloting for our existing granular activated carbon. So we can determine now what facility modifications or design criteria changes might be needed to improve PFAS removal in our liquid stream. So this is a critical step in us being prepared to meet those pending regulations for PFAS, but also utilizing these powerful systems that we have and being able to share that information with the industry that is also looking at how effective granular activated carbon can be. So wanted to run through the scope of the tasks and then get to the costs. So as I mentioned, we have done a lot of negotiation on this task. It's taken about 3 months. Yes, I think there's another question.
He has a question.
Yes, I had a question. You'd mentioned in the, I believe it was the additional evaluations, the digital strategy work in terms of evaluating machine learning. I'm assuming data analytics and several other common tools that are being dispersed across the industry. Is that an internal process to be done within Loudon Water, or are you bringing in an external contract or consulting firm to support you in the digital strategy? Has that been discussed?
So Hazen and Sawyer would lead us through developing the strategy.
Oh,
Implementation
so
of the strategy.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And they're the ones that we have been working with moving forward. I would also say that when it comes to the implementation of the strategy, IT also has specialized consultants helping with the implementation. But the majority of the work is done by Loudon Water staff since they are our systems. So I think it's a great combination of the consultants guiding us and helping us develop the expertise, and then us really taking ownership of it in-house.
Thank you.
Mr. Kobus has a question.
Yes, Kendra, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First, in the, you said there was going to be an independent cost review. Who is paying for that? Is that part of the price? Is that, how much is that?
Yep, that will be a separate task order, and we're currently negotiating with that. But the price range is around in the range of $30,000 for the 4 costs.
Now, in your equipment pre-procurement, is that, I assume that $200,000 is just putting together a bid document, not the
Correct.
actual purchase of any equipment. Okay. And then my last question is, in your additional evaluations, is that an hourly with an upset, or are we just handing over $1 million?
It is time and materials like
Okay.
all of this contract is.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And so when we started looking at the scope of this design task, we started with a much larger scope and a much larger fee. And because of a lot of what we talked through today, we've scaled it back to a very specific and intentional scope that puts us in a good place to get the information we need to justify our larger fees in the future. So as we have already mentioned, our project management cost will cover the 2 years of work estimated under this design task fee. We looked at that fee relative to the project management that was spent on the planning phase, as well as the project management that was done on our phase 2 design, because that was also about a 2-year period. And then it's in a similar percentage range as the percent of our total task value here. And really, The main change we're seeing is that hourly rates are going up over time, as we do expect. So we have kept that in the range of what we know it has cost us in the past. The design basis report is the largest portion of this fee. There is, as I mentioned, a lot of work that goes in here due to the scale of processes that have to be laid out by scratch, building sized, basic calculations done to make sure we're meeting our requirements. There will be alternative evaluations in there. We could lay out our BRB with this option or this option, making sure we're nailing that down. We checked this fee based on number of hours, burn rate over time, and the number of staff that would be taken to do this work. And it was very justifiable based on the fact that, again, it's 14 processes, 8 different disciplines. So we came to agreement on this. Design and bid package 1 was a great question that came from Mr. Sultan, because when we look at that at $800,000 as a percent of the construction we're expecting, which is 25 million, it's really only 3% of the construction fee. So that fee is much lower than the 10% we discussed, but it is a single discipline. It is very targeted work and is really the preparation work for the more complicated and larger scale construction. So this fee we also felt was reasonable based on the number of hours being spent by the discipline staff. Equipment pre-procurement for 2 different procurement packages at $100,000 apiece. This price was negotiated based on the work we had done for the previous membrane pre-procurement. That also set up a really great template for us that we know how we want to do this. It's really updating those documents, but the documents are unique between the membranes and the dryer manufacturer because we're targeting 2 different systems there. And then additional evaluations is all of those studies added up together, and the individual studies were negotiated based on scope and price, and some things were reduced to try and bring down scope to what we felt was needed to do at this level. So asset management, for example, there was a much larger scope evaluated that got us all the way through the end of the project, but we scaled that back to say we really just need the guidance documents so that we know what we need to develop as we move along for those type of tasks. And then piloting here covers all 3 phases of that piloting for PFAS removal. And there's actually a significant level of ODCs or other expenses included in this line item that covers the expensive PFAS sampling and equipment that will need to be purchased for the piloting. And to Mr. Kobelis's point, this is also time and materials because a lot varies when you start piloting and what you want to do. So only money will be spent for the pilot, specific pilot plans that we move forward with at the scale we want to do. I would also like to throw out that we're getting pretty good at piloting and making some of those judgment calls of piloting might be taking longer. So what changes can we make to our approach or our scope to try to keep this in our goals and still accomplish what we need to? And this rolls up to what we're presenting today in the $7.9 million contract. But what's important to know was the schedule on these. So these items will be spent at different rates and completed at different times over the 2-year period. So each one was really evaluated on its own scope and fee basis. So that was what I have today. So the next slide is the motion. So any more questions?
Yes, could you go back to the previous slide? Just in general, how do you come up, let's say the basis of design report, how do you know that the 3 million and change is the right number? I mean, do you go, how, and in general, how do you get coming up with these numbers?
Right. So the 3.7 million was developed by an hourly basis. So we have the hours and rates of the classifications of staff that will be from the consultant that will be working on this project. You look at number of hours being spent over time number of staff being proposed to do the work and make sure they seem reasonable. There is also a design, I'm going to say a metric for this. So we mentioned 10% of construction for an overall design. A basis of design report is typically 1 to 2% of that 10% design fee. So this fee in specific, since it covers all of our construction, is 0.6% of the overall construction value that we know right now. So based on, again, the number of staff they're talking about and the number of different facilities that they're having to lay out and design, we felt that all was a reasonable price.
Okay, that's what we used to do, the same thing. I do have one request, and I'm not trying to create a paper trail, but I would like to see, I don't know, every 6 months or whatever, the status of each of these items, what's been spent, what's remaining. Considering the size of this project, I think a periodic update would be beneficial to the board.
Absolutely. I think our project managers have done a lot of work on setting this up so that we can track it very well, because now's the time, right? It's a 15-year project. There's going to be a lot to track. So I think we have a lot of great plans in place that we can check in. I also think the check-ins are important because we can use that as a basis for negotiation of future contracts, right? And saying, well, based on what we saw here, this is a reasonable number or it's not. So those tracking and check-ins, I think, are really great.
Okay, good.
Mr. Bonfield has a question.
Well, it's not so much a question. I'd like to move the motion and have it referred to the next board meeting.
This is Angeline. I'll second that.
Can we have a roll call? Oh, this is to go to the action agenda.
Yes, definitely to the action, not to consent.
Roll call vote.
Jewel, we have roll call?
Yes, sir. Mr. Sultan,
Yes?
Mr. Bonfield,
Yes.
Mr. Moody,
Yes.
Ms. Sursakar.
Yes.
Thank you. That will be placed on the action agenda at the next board meeting.
And Kendra, once again, you had a good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yes.
We're getting tired saying that, aren't we?
Yeah, thank you so much for all the detail you put in the report. So thank you.
Okay, the next item is the Capital Construction Quarterly Report.
Okay, good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Good. Okay. So I'm going to talk through the third quarter capital construction report. And so,
Go ahead and double click again, Rick. Oh,
okay.
there we go. If you want to go back one.
Okay. So my agenda here for today is to provide a brief snapshot of the 3 smaller active projects that are in construction there, the Selma booster pump upgrades, Howardsville improvements project, and then this Trap Rock flow meter and sample line project. And then I'll go into a little bit more detail on the Broad Run expansion to 15 MGD, that's the phase 2 expansion. And then I'll provide my quarterly numbers here at the end of the presentation. So the Selma booster pump upgrades project here. So that the purpose of that project is to replace an existing manually operated booster pump with 2 smaller pumps and VFDs to cover the low flow condition for the communities that this treatment plant serves. We awarded this contract a little bit earlier this year. It's a small contract, $373,000, and it really has yet to get started. We've just paid for bonds and insurance, and the contractor is really waiting for the materials and equipment to arrive before they mobilize and start construction in earnest. So we're still in that mode of the construction here. And in my pictures, I've got an exterior view of the treatment facility. And then just looking inside, the booster pump here that I'm highlighting is the one that is the original 2000 era pump that was left in place during the 2016 project, and that will be removed and replaced with these 2 smaller jockey pumps to cover the low flow condition. So really the message here is construction has yet to start in earnest as we wait for the arrival of materials and equipment for this project. And as you know, some of the materials and equipment take a while to be fabricated and delivered to these various projects due to the global supply chain and other issues. So moving on to the next project here, the next smaller project. So this is the Howardsville project. The purpose here was to install a temporary pump and haul to monitor flows to set us up for a future drain field installation for this community. We did award the project a little earlier this year. I'm sorry, last year in February, and contract value is just under $1 million. We have reached substantial completion. So in the third quarter, the contractor did achieve substantial completion of this project. And so the remaining work is really permit closeout, punch list, and other project closeout items left to reach the conclusion of this project. So hopefully I'll have good news in coming quarters about the completion of this project. All right, and then our last small project here is the Trap Rock Flow Meter and Sample Line project. And this one is really helping us to enhance our operations with disinfection and also improve our regulatory reporting. This one was awarded December of last year. The contractor has nearly reached substantial completion for this one. We're very close to that milestone, and they've recently completed sort of the finesse work, as I call it, the instrumentation and control pieces of the construction and the commissioning. And so once they hit that substantial completion milestone, the remaining work will really be punch list and closeout. So we're very close on this project as well. Now I'm going to shift over and talk about the Broad Run expansion. So of course, this is the phase 2 expansion to increase the plant capacity from 10 to 15 million gallons per day. We awarded the contract back in June of 2020. Our revised contract value at this time is $77.5 million, and the contractor has earned about 62% of that through the third quarter. Our final completion contractual deadline remains August of 2024, and we're about 53% through the contract time to that milestone. And our change order total through the third quarter is around 1.6 million, and then our schedule performance index still is pretty good for this project at 0.96. So moving forward into the current project status. So what I've got here for you is a graphic that shows the Broad Run facility in a plan view, and I've got a legend that shows red is for not started, blue are areas in construction, yellow indicates testing and startup or commissioning activities, and then the green is the completed areas. And I'll mention that there are a couple of green areas that you can't see on here because they're off the slide here to the north or to the south. Those areas were completed, that being the DCH secondary electric feed at the DCH building, and then some early work on the construction trailers. But I'm going to go ahead and add in the yard piping. This is going to get a little messy, but I'm going to go ahead and add in the yard piping here. And what I want to illustrate by this, I've got in green, I've got the large diameter yard piping. And what I want to illustrate here is that we are pretty far along with yard piping. As I'll mention on the next slide, most of it is finished. And so the project is really kind of up out of the ground now. At this point, we are working above ground. Much of the subsurface work is finished at this point on the project. And so just to focus a little bit on some of the yard piping in a little bit more detail here, I've got some aerial shots of the construction. And so I just want to call out this area is the main sort of east-west yard piping corridor, and it kind of ties into this area right here by the screen and grit and primary clarifiers. This is the heaviest concentration of yard piping on the project right
Rick,
here.
Mr. Koblis has a question.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Rick, if you could just go back to that last slide.
Certainly.
I just wanted to say this is a fantastic slide and very easily shows me what's going on. So whoever came up with this it's just perfect. So I look forward to the slide in each of your presentations.
Okay, sure thing. Thank you. Okay. So on these aerials, I mentioned here, the main east-west yard piping corridor runs along this travelway or this road, and we've got a heavy area of yard piping in this area by the new screen and grit and primary clarifier building expansions. And then I'll just, and by the way, we're looking east in this aerial. And then we're over here in this other aerial on the right side, we're kind of atop the new 10 million gallon equalization tank. And we're looking south, and this is sort of the main north-south corridor of piping. There are several new large diameter pipes in this travelway supporting the new equalization tank and the vault right here as well. And then there are a couple of pipes, large diameter, off to the east and west here as well. But just to provide a little perspective on the prior graphic here, and I mentioned before that we're 90% complete with the yard piping. So again, we're really up out of the ground to a large degree on the project through the third quarter. So moving on here, I'm going to call out a couple of specific work areas and just talk about the progress through the third quarter. So one of those is the odor control improvements. So during the third quarter here at the odor control facility, which encompasses all of these areas here, we set the new pre-humidification scrubber and did much of the underground piping work that would connect the scrubber here to the new biofilter. And we also completed the concrete for the biofilter here. So there's 4 existing biofilters right here. And in the project, we are building a 5th biofilter. And we're at the point now where we're coating the concrete and then moving forward with getting the media installed and getting the biofilter covered up like these other 4. So moving along well here at the odor control improvements. Another area that I want to bring to your attention is the chemical building. So there's a lot of work at the chemical facility, some of which is coating work. On this picture on the right here, we've got a chemical containment area, which would contain a spill if it were to happen. And this has all been coated with a chemical resistant material. And that work has been completed. And then also just some of the other work at the chemical facility, various pumps and piping and accessories have been installed. And then also over here on the left, you see the crane setting in one of the new chemical tanks. We've installed 2 of the new chemical tanks at the chemical facility. So progressing in this area as well at the chemical building. And then we're going to jump over to the electrical building, which involves the installation of the 4th generator. We've got a kind of an up top view of the generator in the picture on your left, lower left-hand corner. And then also you can see the generator here as well in the picture on your right, the first generator you see. And so the work in the generator building is more focused now on power and control conduits. The contractor finished or has generally finished up the big air moving equipment installation. In the center here, we've got the intake grill and fans, which pull air into the building when the engine is running, because the engine is pushing air through the radiator and out of the building. So these fans here provide a balance of air in the building when one of the generators is running. But again, much of the heavy work is winding down here at the generator building, and we're into more of the power and control again, or I like to call it the finesse work with the construction here at the generator building. And the last area I'm going to feature is the screen and grit and primary clarifier area. And so progressively, we're going to step through that. So here's a pre-construction view of the screen and grit building and the primary clarifiers. And then as we step through the construction progress here, we'll jump ahead to the first quarter of 2021, where we start to see progress there with structural work. It continues There we go. Okay, it continues through the first quarter of 2022 and also the second quarter as well. You can see the structural concrete work progressing as well. And then I've got a really nice aerial here for you to look at through the third quarter of the screen and grit and primary clarifier. So here is the screen and grit expansion right here. Through the third quarter, contractor continues to pour concrete, basically still working on slab concrete placements and wall concrete placements here. And then over to the primary clarifier expansion, you can see the transition in color of the new versus the existing primary clarifiers. So here at the primary clarifiers, we've completed all concrete work in the third quarter, and we have tested the tanks, the clarifier tanks, and they've passed their hydrostatic test. And so we have moved on in the clarifier building to some of the process piping work. And then, of course, we'll also get into some of the mechanical work very soon in this building as well. So here's kind of a progressive picture of a 30-inch diameter pipe, which will feed one of the new clarifiers being installed. Okay. So continuing on here, I've got my summary construction data from the Broad Run project. So I've got our overall submittal count and request for clarification or request for information counts here. Also, I've got our total concrete placement amount here. So out of a total of about 16,000 cubic yards, we're about 95% placed with our concrete on the project. And then also at the bottom here, I've just got my statistics for yard piping. I mentioned that we're 90% placed with our yard piping footage on the project so far. Okay, we'll move on here. So some summary information I want to share with you. So one good thing I want to call out is that we have a very good working relationship with the contractor. We really work well with Kokosing Industrial, and it helps to have a good relationship with the contractor, which we have. And so we continue to maintain that through the various communication devices in the contract, our shop drawings and RFIs and other notices. That is going well. We also continue to meet permits. So the disruptions and interruptions caused by this project, because it is a retrofit project with a lot of connection points, tie-ins, shutdowns, and the like, that continues to go well, and we continue to maintain permit compliance with the plant. As with all construction projects, there are quality issues, but we continue to track and get those addressed by the contractor promptly. At the moment here, we do not have any outstanding unresolved claims or disputes on the table, so that's very positive. Going over to the contract time, we are nearly on time with the project. For the first time in the third quarter, the contractor's schedule update started to show a little bit of a late finish for substantial completion. The schedule update through September shows us at minus 18 days or 18 days late on completion. And my next slide will speak to that as well. And then on change orders, we've got 9 executed. I mentioned the total change order amount is about 1.6 million through these 9 change orders. We did have our 10th change order executed here early in the fourth quarter. It didn't quite make it in the third quarter, but roughly we're executing about 1 change order per quarter, more or less. We continue to be on that pace. Okay, I'm going to shift here next to talk about risk. And
I have one question.
Yes.
On the communication between parties, do you use a formal partnering process, or you just do it well?
We have not. We've just done it well, Mr. Sultan. I realize the importance of maintaining a good relationship with the contractor, and I've just done what I can to do that, utilizing meetings and the written communication items as well, and just other things. So we've not had any formal partnering, in that sense, or in the sense of Trap Rock, which I think there was formal partnering, but we have not utilized that.
Well, it sounds like you're doing it okay. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay, so again, as shared in the past, supply chain or global supply chain delays do present the greatest risk to the project. And to date, we've seen those impacting ductile iron pipe and fittings, instrumentation components, and then also some stainless steel as well. And with the mitigation strategies that we've used to try to keep these to a minimum, on our end, we've encouraged the contractor to submit their submittals in a timely manner and also release them for fabrication once they reach an approved state. Well, we continue to encourage the contractor to be timely with those. And then on our end, we have strived to meet or exceed the contract requirements for submittal review times. And then also, we have allowed the contractor to open up some additional concurrent work areas. So in our contract, there's a constraint that says that the contractor is only allowed to work in 6 concurrent work areas at one time. And that was set up to kind of minimize the burden to plant staff and to the project staff with too many work areas, but we found that we can accommodate more. And so largely over the last quarter and even this year, we've allowed the contractor to bump up their work areas to 8, 9, or even 10 work areas at times, to the extent that we can accommodate that. And then another thing we've done that's not listed is this project involves many tie-ins and interconnections to the existing plant. And those requests to perform that work comes from the contractor as coordination and shutdown requests. And just to give you a flavor of the quantities, we have about 190 coordination requests submitted on the project so far, and about 125 shutdown requests. And so what we've done to help the contractor in this area is some expedited reviews. On many of these requests, we have exceeded the required review time with our review of these to allow the contractor to perform the work sooner than they would otherwise be allowed by contract. So we're definitely working with the contractor to try to minimize the supply chain delays, which are attributable to the contract time issue that I mentioned on the prior slide. So we're doing what we can to help out within the bounds of the contract. Okay. With that, that brings me to my summary data here, summary project list here. So on the top, those are the 4 active projects that are in construction. Those are the stats on the projects. And then in the middle, I've got the 1 completed project from the 3rd quarter, the Cortland project. So this will be your last view of that project, and then it will drop off my tables here for the next quarter. And then our 2 up-and-coming projects at the bottom are the Paragon Park and the Beaver Dam Reservoir project, and those will just be getting started this month. So does anyone have questions about this data or any of the other slides that I presented? Okay.
Okay, let's move on to the next item. Very good report. Very good.
Okay, thank you.
I can tell you when I had construction at Fairfax, we didn't do that well. Okay, the next item.
Mr. Koblis has a question.
Yeah, this question is actually for Tom. So when are we getting the CIP sheets?
We'll have them to you as we're kind of still wrapping up our preparation here. So we'll get them to you in advance of the next meeting. So probably a goal of next week.
Okay, I mean, don't, aren't we like looking at the costs tomorrow?
No, middle of November.
Oh, I thought Brian was presenting the budget for tomorrow.
Brian's presenting the operating budget,
I got it.
and
Okay,
then, yeah.
got it.
Yep.
Never mind.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, I'll just mention that as Rick was showing, there's a lot of project activity has continued throughout 2022. He was talking about the construction projects, but all of our projects, you know, we continue to make progress. So you can see the spending through September here is tracking just slightly above what the mid-year reforecast was that was done at the middle of the year. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
I assume that the lag time is the result of procurement of equipment and things of that nature.
A lot of it is associated with some of that, as well as just some of the pace of the projects in general.
Any other questions? Okay, let's move on to the next item.
So that would be to adjourn the meeting.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, this is Keith. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
This is Jim Bonfeld, second.
Can we get a roll call?
Yes, Mr. Sultan,
Yes?
Mr. Bonfils,
Yes.
Mr. Moody,
Yes.
Ms. Sursakar, Ms. Sursakar. Ms. Sursakar is absent for the vote, and the meeting is adjourned at 9:06 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. It's great reports.